Hello, everybody. It is I, Blind Metal Gamer, here with you once again. And in today's live discussion, I felt like this is something that needs to be discussed with the upcoming Star Wars Day 2025. To those who will be celebrating Star Wars Day, happy Star Wars Day to you early. It'll be Sunday, May 4th. And no, your boy ain't celebrating Star Wars Day, so get that out of your head right now. Your boy ain't celebrating. But what I am going to be discussing today is along the Star Wars theme. So, recently, the new video game Star Wars Zero Command was announced. And to give an overview of the game, it will be a strategy game, similar to games such as XCOM. Now, what I want to discuss today is a question that I've had because I'm recently a part of the blind gaming community now, or Gamers Without Sight. Uh, And the question is this: how can these games be made accessible for us gamers who have no vision? Now, I do want to say up front, I am not, repeat, am not an accessibility consultant. However, I advocate for accessibility in the video game space by doing talks like this, and I like to um, just talk about how these things can be made accessible. I mean, because it can be done, especially with what we're going to talk about today, because they got the big boys, EA, publishing it. So, yes, the big boys, EA, are publishing this. This is going to be a strategy game. It's being developed, I think, by Respawn's working on it and some other folks. So, Respawn are the people that did Star Wars, Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now, the first thing I'm going to explain here with these strategy games, you control your units, you move your units, and then you're able to fire weapons, etc. Now, before I dive into the accessibility piece, I do want to say that um, I believe that, again, this can be done. Hey, viewers, what's up? So, okay. So now I do want to get started on the accessibility piece of the discussion. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about, and for a game like this, and this is with any game, screen reader. I'm not just talking about a mini narrator. I'm not talking about your basic screen reader. I'm talking go all in with this. Make this screen reader read everything: menus, game information, gameplay information. Because with an RTS, you're going to need that as a blind and low vision gamer. So for the developers, for Respawn, for whoever else is working on it, for EA, the first thing I'm going to say is definitely add a screen reader to this. Not just a basic menu narrator. I'm talking full on, full force screen reader, kind of like how you did with Dead Space. Definitely a screen reader. That's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to talk about, and this is more of a visual thing, and this is for those who need it, high contrast mode. And the reason why I suggest high contrast mode is it'll help players distinguish the enemy. Or, it'll darken the background. That way, the player can focus on who the enemies are and who the allies are. Another thing I'm going to add into this high contrast piece is custom colors. You heard me right. So, for example, let's say you have high contrast on, and you want your allies to be, let's say, yellow. You can do that. And you want the enemies to be green or purple or red. You can do that. Customize the color selection to fit the player's needs. Because if you have a player who is colorblind and cannot distinguish certain colors, you need not just a colorblind filter, but full color customization for not only high contrast mode, but for what I'm going to get into next. Um, but for the high contrast mode, you can use it to use full color customization to distinguish allies, enemies, interactables, weapons, etc. Now, the next thing that customizable colors are going to be used for, or should be used for a game like Star Wars Zero Command, is subtitles. Yes, you heard this correctly. If the game has subtitles, and we don't know what it's got because it just got revealed, so we are kind of in the dark here. This is just speculation. But if, I'm sure it's going to have subtitles, so let's make it where the background of the subtitles can be turned all the way to black. The opacity can be increased. Then make subtitles not only customizable in terms of color, but make them customizable in terms of size. Make it where we, as the player, can crank that text up to as big as we need it to where we can read it. So for those who are deaf or hard of hearing, who need subtitles, who also need it to be large or color customizable or all of the above, will have those options available to them. That's what you got to do here. Hey, viewers. And okay, okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, I've talked about high contrast mode, subtitles, text size, and the text size thing should be not only applicable to subtitles, but it needs to be applicable to menus as well. So menu text, be able to customize the size, the font, the color to your liking as well, or your needs. Now, another thing I want to talk about is game speed. Now you're thinking, Blind Metal Gamer, this is an RTS game. Why would you want to slow the game down? Why slow it down? Well, guys, let me explain. By slowing down the game, it'll allow players with motor disabilities or players perhaps with cognitive disabilities more time to react, more time to focus on planning their moves, more time on getting the applicable weapon or unit equipped. It'll allow them to learn enemy patterns. It'll allow them to better prepare themselves on the battlefield. Now, again, these are all options that should be in the game for accessibility. Now, as far as like the speed it should be slowed down to, I would say a minimum of 25% to a maximum of 100%. That's how that should be done. Now, as far as in terms of the subtitles, I want to circle back to real quick. Speaker tags. These subtitles need to have speaker tags that are fully color customizable and size customizable, and they need, not only just for speaker tags but arrows to where sound effects are coming from. So let's say on the battlefield behind one of the players is an explosion. Let's say you get a subtitles thing that tells the player that behind that particular unit there was an explosion. It'll make it more immersive for the deaf and hard of hearing folks. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about, and this wouldn't really need to be done as far as like in a game like Star Wars Jedi Survivor or whatever the next Jedi game is. Navigational assist in a game like this could be helpful, but I don't think it would really be needed as much because you're on a flat battlefield and you're on a plane just going up, down, left, or right, and you got squares to go to. Now, one thing that I feel would be helpful is audio cues. So let's say you're on the plane. You hear ding, ding, ding. That means you can move. It'll be your turn to move or attack or whatever. And then maybe have a different audio cue for enemies. You know, that way the player who is blind or has low vision knows it's either their turn or the enemy's turn to make a move. Now, one thing that they did in Mortal Kombat 1's Invasions mode, their navigational assist was pretty interesting. Now, here's how navigational assist could work in a game like Star Wars Zero Command. You have your audio cues, right? You click the right stick or push a button, you hear ding, ding, like all the different directional cues for navigation. That would let the player know which ways they could proceed with their character. So that's how navigational assist could work. Um, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna say definitely if there are in-game cutscenes, descriptive audio, and I'm gonna preach that to the higher heavens because that's something that needs to be in there for gamers without sight, for sure. As far um, and let's see, I've discussed menu narrator or screen reader, game speed, contrast mode, color blindness. I've discussed navigational assist. I've discussed um, descriptive audio, text size. Let's see, I'm thinking if I'm leaving anything out on here. Oh yes. Um, Another thing that could be done to make this more accessible is when we're going to use our weapons or whatever, when it comes to unit building, give us again a menu to cycle through, just a simple menu, and the menu narrator would read that menu for things like building units and whatnot. So I think I've discussed what, in my view, needs to be done to make this accessible for gamers without sight. Now, again, if anyone has anything they want to say in the comment section, please feel free to do so. I mean, I'm always up for discussion, so let's discuss this further and speculate how this game could be made accessible for gamers without sight. Now, before I leave you today, I want to say I do want to give some shout outs. I want to give a shout out to my boy Silver Chain. I want to give a shout out to the Evil Chocolate Cookie. They both rock. Um, Especially the Evil Chocolate Cookie. She is awesome. Silver Chain is awesome too. I want to give a shout out to Misdemeanor Rayburn. I want to give a shout out to Sightless Combat, Cradlehead, the Sightless One. I want to give a shout out to the late great Super Blind Man. I want to give a shout out to Steve Sandler. I want to give a shout out to Susie Hunter. I want to give a shout out to Maximilian Dude. I want to give a shout out to Dynasty. I want to give a shout out to all the game devs that work their asses off on these games to make them accessible for gamers like us who have no sight. I want to give a shout out to all consultants who work their asses off to help make these games accessible for us blind and low vision gamers. So shout out to all of you. I want to give a shout out to, let's see, I want to give a shout out to anyone who is celebrating Star Wars Day and anyone who is not celebrating Star Wars Day, like you boy. I'm not celebrating that, so I'm just wanting to come in here, do this stream, and do this talk, and go from there. So, with that being said, this is my discussion on how Star Wars Zero Command can be made accessible for gamers without sight. With that being said, I would like to thank you all for watching, viewing, liking, subscribing, and enjoying. And as always, there will be more epic live gaming coming very soon. So until next time, I've been your host, Blind Metal Gamer, saying so long, everyone, and peace out.